we usually in case late arrivals come?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we usually get a few drivers.
Drivers, yeah.
Anybody? Anybody want anything?
No, can't afford it.
Well, good evening.
Evening.
My name's Tom Conwell with Tri-City Paranormal Society. In addition to being a ufologist, I'm also a paranormal investigator. That's my buddy Rick. Rick, I pretty much work for him when I go in to do investigations, and my son Tim is along with us. He's also on the team.
Oh, that's good. You cover a lot of area?
Oh, hi,
There she
Anita.
is, isn't Anita?
Hi. Hi. Hi.
Okay. Just to more or less put things in perspective for you, I cannot tell you anything that will prove that a UFO exists. I also, in any evidence that anybody else says, will be able to disprove that a UFO exists. Okay? So it's in the eyes of the beholder. And there are definitely some questionable things going on. And we need to keep looking up and get more and more information. And the word respect, everybody, if I were to sit down with everybody here, and I can guarantee you everyone would have a slightly different opinion about UFOs, extraterrestrials, their involvement on the Earth and whatever else. So please respect other people's opinions. We could have somebody who's just a total disbeliever. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But feel free to express your opinion along the way. There'll be a question and answer session later. And we'll just go on with it. We go. This is in Bosnia. This is a pyramid. In Bosnia. They think this could be 25,000 years old. That was a long time ago, let me tell you. Back then, humans weren't doing much of anything. Okay? This is a cave drawing. It's in France. I don't know what this thing is, not sure, but it looks like it has maybe 6 arms, 2 legs, a tail, and a head. I don't know if it's supposed to be a bug or what it is, not sure. This almost looks like a UFO, doesn't it? Okay? And later on, I'm going to be talking about something called a Vimana. Right? A Vimana is a flying machine that was found in India, and there's lots of references to that. And remember the Vimana picture because I'm going to be referring back to it later. Now, you notice on the last 2 slides, I mentioned could be 25,000 years old, and the next one is 15 to 17,000 years old. Well, the reason I put this up is because I started asking questions to some of the people that I had just done a basic presentation with, and they said to me, well, how come that you couldn't get closer in your date? How come you didn't know if it was 15,300 years old? Why 15 to 7? That's a pretty big span, okay? The other one I said, could it be 25,000? They said, well, why don't you do carbon dating, right? Carbon dating, why not, okay? Here's the problem. There's a carbon atom in the periodic table of the elements, and that's a nitrogen atom. And I'm going to give you a real quick formula. I don't want you to be, concerned about this, but I'm going to go through it real quickly. This is from cosmic rays. Free neutrons that are zipping through the space. They enter the Earth's atmosphere. What's the first thing they're likely to hit? Nitrogen. Why? Because nitrogen is 80% of our atmosphere. So they're more likely to hit nitrogen. When they hit nitrogen, what happens is nitrogen is close to carbon. Nitrogen has 7 protons, carbon has 6. The first thing it does is slam into the nitrogen. The nucleus absorbs the neutron and kicks out a proton. Now nitrogen was in the atmosphere like this, and now it's there. because it kicked out a proton. The interesting thing about that is it added more protons to the nucleus than was really there before. So what happens is you have heavy carbon. Carbon that has too many neutrons in it. Eventually, that will decay. Well, here's the kicker. Carbon won't exist by itself in the air. It wants to mate with something. All right? If it mated with 4 hydrogens, you'd have methane. Well, the most likely thing for it to mate with is oxygen, because oxygen contains about 20% of our atmosphere. So, what's a carbon with 2 oxygens? CO2. Okay? And there's plenty of CO2, but this CO2 is extra heavy. Eventually, this CO2 works its way down into our water supply, gets absorbed by the plants and even the animals. Us, we absorb it. And that's the way that they date how long it's been since that person existed. Okay? They look at the percentage of carbon. The carbon 12 is the carbon with 6 protons, 6 neutrons. Carbon 13 is 6 protons and 7 neutrons. Carbon 14, which is what I just showed you before in that little equation, that is 6 protons and 8 neutrons. Now eventually this will decay. It'll get absorbed into your bones and decay. 5,700 years later, half of it will be gone. But they knew, based on what they're seeing in plant life, in animal life, in whatever else life, actual life, that will exist as a trace, 1 part in a trillion. And they can go back 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 years, and if a piece of bone actually survived it, they would be able to tell how long that bone has been since it was living. Okay? That's what carbon dating is. Well, how come they can't trace that to a structure? Because the structure is not living. It's a piece of rock. The only thing they can do is find out when that rock was created, and it was probably created when the Earth was created. 4.5 billion years ago. That's all they can do. They can infer that, well, maybe that thing existed because they think that maybe there was a civilization there. That's all they could do is infer it, right? When carbon gets heavy, it's called an isotope. You've all heard that name. When the isotope goes from carbon 14 decaying back down to carbon 12, that is called radioactivity. And when 1/2 of it decays from its carbon 14 down to carbon 12, 1/2 of the quantity decays, then that makes it a half-life. So, here's our next test. What do you call an atom that contains more neutrons in the nucleus than normal? An isotope. Okay? Just mentioned it. The atom's act of decaying to its normal state is called radioactivity. What do you call it when half of the heavy element decays back to normal? Half-life. Okay? And what do you call it when an isotope, a half-life, and radioactivity are all discussed in the same place at the same time? Anybody? Science fiction B movie. Yeah. Somebody's going to step in front of a particle beam and become a fly in a week. Okay? Ain't guaranteed. Okay. So, let's get back to some things that have been seen over the years. In Italy, there's a rock drawing. Looks like 2 men, almost looks like they're glowing, doesn't it? Looks like something is around their head. And I don't know what these things are meant to be, these little lines here, but perhaps they are, perhaps they're meant to be that they're radiating light. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what was in their mind 10,000 years ago. Okay? But we're gonna also remember that picture. Remember I talked about the Vermonters before? Remember that picture because I'm gonna refer to it. In Utah, look at some of those things that are drawn. What the heck are they? So this almost looks like a Robbie the Robot thing, you know? This looks like, I don't know what. Strange body shape, great big head, huge eyes. There's another body here with, look like antennas coming out of their head. Now, did they make this stuff up? I don't know if they did. Somebody drew it. Generally, when people draw something, it's because of what they've seen. Usually, okay? But then again, you know, this is not proof that there was an alien there, but it certainly is odd. 500 BC. Okay. Egypt. Now, the three pyramids are aligned so that it almost looks like three stars in the sky in Orion's belt. Okay, looks very much like it. Okay, the height of the pyramids are set up for the exact intensity of the stars when you look at them in the sky. One is pretty bright, the other is very bright, and the other is a whole lot dimmer. If you look at it on a really clear night, you'll be able to see that. Okay. Now, I'm not going to read these slides to you because I hate when people read slides, okay? Read them yourself. I don't want to read them to you because you're all big people. Now, during pyramid creation, this was in Dendera, which is in Egypt. It's a place that's just north of Luxor. And I'm not sure what that's supposed to show, this thing. This was before they were able to blow glass and create devices of them. 100 BC is when they actually first were able to create containers out of glass. But that came a whole lot before that. Now, is this a lotus flower? And the lotus flower is creating a snake from life. But then, what's this? Looks like a wire, okay? Well, if you watch Ancient Aliens, they'll tell you, well, it's because it was electric. Well, I'm not so sure it was electric, but that sure is odd. Okay, that's really strange. I don't know what to think about it. Now, this was from a reading of the cuneiform that was written in Egypt. Tutmos reported flying discs. Again, very odd. Maybe they were birds. I don't know. Nobody was there. No one knows. But again, it certainly was odd. Akhenaten is one of the pharaohs. Well, his real name was Amenhotep IV, but he was shown in pictures with an elongated head. Very shortly after he left as a pharaoh, they purged all of his pictures. They just cleaned them up. There's almost no pictures of that pharaoh. That's his daughter. Now, why would he want his daughter to be shown with a superior skull like that? That's really elongated and very odd. Have no idea why they did that. None. Ezekiel. Well, the song goes, Ezekiel saw a wheel rolling way in the middle of the air. Okay? Well, he's a prophet. Okay? And his name is mentioned in the Quran, in the Old Testament, in Jewish writings, in Sanskrit, okay? His name was prominent. It was all over the place. And he had continuing visions. And to this day, people with continuing visions of things are the ones that claim that they have been abducted more than anyone else, more than any other group of people. People who are psychic will make that claim. 329 BC, Alexander the Great, well, he was on a mission to try to conquer the world. Did a pretty good job. His army was getting tired. They really didn't want to do anymore. But he said, just one more, we're going to go into India, and we're going to take over India. Well, apparently, in his writing, he wrote that just as they were crossing the Ganges River into a section of India, that the elephants were flown at by flying discs that scared him, made the elephant stampede, routed his army, and he never went back. That's in his writing. Remember I talked about Vimanas, okay? Take a look at this thing right here. What we saw in that other one was like a thing across the top like that, okay? And there was some lines under it. And this is like a little area where people can sit, but there's wings attached. Now why would they think that something like that could fly? There's just no reason for them. This right here was an actual drawing that came out of the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is a ancient Sanskrit, almost along the lines of what the Bible is. Very good way to live. Let me tell you a story about that Bhagavad Gita one time. I was in Denver, flying back from a work challenge, and some guy came up to me, bald, in a white tunic, and he was trying to tell me about the Bhagavad Gita, and said that there's wonderful information in this thing. It's a way to live your life, real full of goodness and everything else. Well, I was bored. My plane was canceled. So I said, okay, fine. Gave the guy a 10, took the book, and started reading it. And it reminded me of the Bible, like you wouldn't believe. It really is indeed a way to live your life. But within the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, by the way, the Bhagavad Gita is like a piece of the Mahabharata. Within that, there are stories about flying machines clashing and having a war. Now, when I read the Bhagavad Gita, I didn't catch that. That was back in '76. But I'm going to go back and read it again. I can't wait now. I'm not so sure that that was really like that, or if someone liberally defined what the thing was trying to say to you. I'm just not sure. I think many of us have heard about the Nazca lines. Now, why this race of people would decide to create things that were thousands of feet long that can only be seen from the sky, I'll never know. It makes no sense to me. But they did all over that area. There's long lines that are parallel to each other that go for 2 and 3 miles. This almost looks like a landing strip, although if you looked at the ground under it, it's very rocky. You couldn't put anything in there. But, I don't know, again, really odd. And there's another carving that they did on a rock with a guy that's like facing upward. He's waving. Not sure what it means, but in Teotihuacan, Mexico. This is down in the southern area of Mexico, alongside of the Gulf of Mexico. But there are several different larger monuments like this, and they are in a placement exactly like the pyramids. Just like I showed you, the pretty big one, a very big one, and one that's considerably smaller, and they're not in a straight line. And when you look up in the sky and look at Orion's belt, they aren't in a straight line either, and it's exactly the same way. Were they trying to tell us something? I don't know yet. Palenque, Mexico. This picture here was found on the sarcophagus of Lord Pakal. He was their leader. Now, he's doing something or other. Almost looks like he's flying something. Could be driving something. Well, they didn't have any machines back then they could drive. I don't know what he's doing. Have no idea. But he's doing something that didn't exist then, that's for darn sure. And by the way, I started putting these up. I would put them up every so often. I mentioned BC. Well, there's BC, which is before Christ, but the people who weren't Christian didn't like that, so they created their own thing. They called it BCE, which is before the Common Era. When the Common Era was basically right around the time that Christ was born, the dates are identical. Okay, and you can have AD, which is Anno Domini, or Year of Our Lord, and CE, which is the Common Era. So before Common Era and Common Era, or AD and BC. In the Bolivian highlands, these stones are absolutely incredible. If you could get up to them, you could run your hands on the inside of them, and they are just like a tabletop. They're just this now is a whole lot nicer than this. I mean, they are perfectly smooth, perfectly smooth. And there's inside cuts on these stones that are 8 to 10 inches deep. Inside cuts, not an outside cut that you can get a chisel to. Oh no, they're on the inside, and they're perfect. And you can put a square right up in the corner, and it will just fit edge to edge, absolutely perfectly. They made thousands of those. It was theorized that it was a base for extraterrestrials. I don't know, maybe. But they made a whole bunch of these, supposedly in one night. And we can't even pass a law in 6 months. Okay. These are the Moai on Easter Island. These are all over Easter Island. There's groups of them facing the water. Now why they would do that, I'm not sure. I don't have too much of a problem with this, and I don't think that I'm going to jump to, oh, extraterrestrials were involved here, because I'm not so sure that they were. Because they proved later that you could take these things, make them on the other side of the island, and then rock them, sort of walk them like this along the way, and move them from one side of the island to the other. Took a lot of people and a lot of time, but it was possible to do. So I'm not going to jump on that one, but they are awfully heavy stones and move great distances, and they're all facing the sea for some reason or another. Christopher Columbus, in his writings, in his logbook, he said many times he saw lights in the sky. Well, sure, at night he's seeing stars, right? Okay, but these stars went down into the water and then came out of the water and did a lot of things along those lines. He had no knowledge of what this could potentially be. None. American Indians. Remember the Valcamonica area with the luminous guy? What did they say? They reported strange luminous people interacting with them. Well, the other thing was drawn 10,000 BC. Same people? I don't know, it's odd. Now, the Indians didn't write a whole lot down. They made a couple of drawings, but they would generally tell stories from father to son. That's how they did it. 1942, battle over Los Angeles. Now this actually happened. The United States was at high alert, saw something in the sky, pointed a bunch of lights at it, and fired probably 10,000 rounds at it. Explosions all over the place, but that thing just stayed there. Oh well, didn't care. Again, quite a strange occurrence. June 1947, Kenneth Arnold. He was flying a single-engine plane over near Mount Rainier, and to his left and below him went a bunch of flying saucers. Strange shaped discs, he said. Almost like discs that would skip across water. That's how he described it. That's where the term flying saucer came from. But what he's doing there is that's what he saw. And he had a picture drawn of it, and he posed with the picture. Roswell, New Mexico. Well, crash in desert, alien bodies recovered, in the newspaper the next day. The day after that, no, that was just a blur. The people? Nah, they weren't other people. You know, don't worry about that. And to this day, they've stuck with that answer. Very, very unusual. But they still say that they had plenty of recordings of aliens, and have since that period of time, or actually slightly before that period of time, they have been working with aliens ever since. That's what some people say. I don't say that because I don't have first-hand knowledge of it, so I can't say that. But somebody says it. 1948, the U.S. created Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was set to study some aerial phenomena. J. Allen Hynek, it says the head appointed, well, he didn't become the head of Project Blue Book for several years afterward, but he was a scientist. And the job there was to investigate some of the sightings that they saw. And time after time after time, all of the sightings came out to be either swamp gas, or somebody saw Venus, or whatever else. It was never a flying device that was unexplainable. It was never that. And later created CE1, CE2, and CE3. Anybody know what that is? Close encounters of the first kind, close encounters of the second kind, and close encounters of the third kind. Since then, there's been two other close encounter events. Close encounters of the fourth and fifth kind. The fifth kind is almost like the fourth kind, so in this next slide, I just talked about that. If you see a spacecraft within 500 feet, and just see it and it flies away, there's no interaction, that's a close encounter of the first kind. Second kind is see it plus physical evidence. That means you saw it land, or drop something out of the air, and you were able to recover it. Or when it landed, perhaps there was some impressions in the ground. Perhaps it left something along the lines of background radiation, or some sort of change in this. Close encounters of the third kind. Well, that's what the movie was named after, okay? Sightings of occupants in and around the UFO. Now, the sightings, actually, what it was close encounters of the second kind was what occurred that made everybody go out to the west. Close encounters of the third kind was when that craft finally landed and they were able to greet the people, okay? But they didn't mention close encounters of the fourth kind. That's when that little kid was taken, and the pilots and all that other stuff, all right? Close encounters of the fourth kind occurred then too. I don't know why they didn't name it that, but they didn't. Maybe they didn't know. Pretty cool stuff. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind is very similar to the fourth kind, in that it involved alien abduction and direct communication, and I believe the direct communication was on the lines of mental communication, mental telepathy. But when you say direct communication, as far as I'm concerned, that's direct communication, so I didn't even put fifth kind on there. Two commercial pilots saw a cigar-shaped object flying over Alabama. Why is that important? Anybody? Because they're pilots. They know what's in the sky. They are experts at what they're seeing. And if they reported a flying cigar, you can bet it was a flying cigar. Okay? Very important. Yeah. They don't report them anymore. No. 1952. This was the DC phenomenon. That's an actual photograph. Those lights, those were the spacecraft. They scrambled jets on 2 different occasions to go up and shoo them away, whatever they were. And as they got up there, they all disappeared. They flew around for a while. Well, I guess they're gone. They went back, landed, boop, there they were again. But that was pretty interesting. And that got a whole lot of people nervous, let me tell you. Crop circles. Well, I could do an entire hour lecture on crop circles, where they come from, how they're created, and what the potentials are, okay? There's 3 different ways you can create a crop circle that is accepted. Actually, only 2 are accepted. The third one's poo-pooed, all right? The first one is some guy gets a plank, attaches a couple of ropes to it, puts the rope down into the growing whatever, weed or whatever, and presses it down, puts his foot up, lifts it up, goes to the next one, presses it down, lifts it up, goes to the next one, and then he can create a pattern in the grass or whatever it is. It works. You can do that. No problem. I'd like to see him create one of those 3. That's what I'd like to see. Because I don't think he can do it. And those things appear sometimes, well, they definitely appear overnight. And they've been known to appear in 10 minutes. Just, whoop, there it is. Right? Now the second way is downward drafts of air vortices, okay? Just almost like mini tornadoes. They actually create circles. They've seen them any number of times. They will create circles. They're created by nature, and that's absolutely positively true. However, when you have something created by nature, one of the problems that occurs is that you get variations. You will rarely get a complete pattern, okay? It'll do 60% of one and then go off and do something else, or only do 20% of it and then be all smushed around and you won't be able to tell what it is. Right? Absolutely, there's almost no way that an air vortices will be able to do that on a regular basis and to its completion. It's possible that vortices of air could do it once. It's possible. The third way that's poo-pooed is extraterrestrials are creating these, trying to give us some sort of message. Well, what the heck does that say? I mean, I don't know. This one here is, I think, very interesting. This is purely mathematical. This almost looks like the center point of a circle. Certainly an arc drawn based on this center point, and the next center point has that arc, and the next center point has this arc. That looks very mathematical. What they're trying to say with that, I have no idea. And if they were indeed trying to give us a message, I think they're smart enough to put it in English. So I don't know what they are. No idea. And 90% of them are created where there's strong ley lines, such as in England. in and around the Stonehenge temples. Very odd. Ooh boy, very odd. Okay. Oh, where am I? Okay, 1952. 6 crafts spotted by hundreds of persons during a day over Argentina. Hundreds of people looked up, saw a big craft flying through the air. Very visible. They certainly couldn't say that they didn't actually see that. They couldn't say it, all right? 1965, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. This object was first spotted over Canada and spotted on radar, and it was creating a tremendous amount of smoke and debris spitting out the back. Then it went over Ohio and Pennsylvania. People said it changed course at least once and slowed down. I don't know if it did, but if the people that said that were looking at the contrail from this thing that was flying through the air, I don't know if you looked up high at a jet flying, but if you do, what will happen is behind the jet, the contrail starts to look wavy and whatever else, because the wind catches it, right? Now, this thing is spitting out a tremendous amount of smoke and debris and stuff behind it, and that could have been what somebody thought. I don't know for certain. It could have been.
Went back.
Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. It was removed by the military. The people who saw it said it was shaped like a bell.
Little copper too.
1968. Remember the date. Minot, North Dakota. B-52s. What does that tell you? Strategic Air Command Base. Spotted a whole bunch of disc-shaped objects flying over top of their... Actually, they were hovering over where the nukes were stored. Well, guess what? They're still doing it. They shut down several nuclear sites last spring because they just hovered over them, blanketed them with EMF, and shut everything down. Made everybody really nervous. But they can do whatever they want to do. That same year, Project Blue Book was stopped. But the thing here, I'm going to read this to you because it's so important. Project Blue Book stated that it no longer needs to investigate because this is no longer a concern to the United States or a risk to U.S. security. So they stopped investigating. Just stopped. Shortly thereafter, J. Allen Hynek thought that actually accused everybody on the Project Blue Book of shoddy science. And he created his own investigative group. Rendlesham Forest, Bentwaters. This was seen by multiple hundreds of military guys. There was a craft that landed in the woods outside of Rendlesham, also outside of Bentwaters Air Force Base, and also was found at one point to be hovering over the nukes nukes that were stored. James Penniston and John Burroughs still give lectures to this day about what they saw and whatever else, and they were told that they were to leave out data on the report because it was so damning. And no one could explain it if they wrote up exactly what happened. In 1987, 2 books were written. Communion by Whitley Strieber and Intruders by John Mack. Since then, people have not been afraid to talk about alien abductions. I'm doing interviews now with 3 people who have been abducted. Some of the things that I'm hearing, let me tell you, are absolutely bizarre. absolutely bizarre. But I believe them because they're just, they're so genuine. What I like to do is I like to start asking people questions, and I'll ask them 6, 7, 8 different ways the same thing over a period of several weeks. Well, nobody's smart enough to be able to tell me the same story every time. Something changes, okay, if they're making it up. If they're not making it up, it's pretty consistent. And that's what I found. I also found the 3 people that I've spoken to so far are, how do I describe this? When they tell the story, it's the first time they've been able to release the story, and they feel like they are, have a weight lifted, and they come across as being hyperactive. Because they've never been able to tell the story, and no one's ever listened to them before. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And in 1995, the Air Force finally released their final report from Roswell and said it's a crashed balloon used for spying on the Soviets. Of course it is. 1989 through 1990, the Belgian wave. Now this happened too. There were multiple sightings by civilians. The civilians reported it to the police. The police sent their cruisers out and looked very carefully at what was there in the sky. That's a picture of what they saw. It's an actual photograph. There were hundreds of sightings. Hundreds. The Phoenix Lights. There was a triangular shaped craft, or at least that was the report, it was triangular. I'm not so certain it was triangular, it could have been multiple crafts. Nobody really could see the outline of this craft in the sky, although they said it blocked out a tremendous amount of stars. This appeared at 8:30 and flew over Phoenix, seen by countless amounts of people. Also reported by the governor of Arizona, Fife Symington, and he talked about it too. Got into trouble for making fun of it, by the way. But now, again at 10 o'clock on the same night, they saw this thing again in a slightly different place. The problem was, the military was dropping flares at that point. And they said, well, the sighting you saw at 8:30 was the flares, okay? Well, it wasn't the flares because flares look totally different in the sky. And a lot of the people that viewed these things were airline pilots and military people. They knew what flares look like. Seen them 1,000 times. And this craft was absolutely enormous. One person described the craft to be nearly a mile wide. It moved very, very slowly and didn't make a sound. As compared to a 747 that would fly over, it would rattle your teeth out. At that height, anyhow. January 2000. This is a southwestern Illinois sighting. This was seen by 5 police officers. Well, okay, fine. But the 5 police officers were in 5 different districts. The one person saw, the one person was told because there was a phone call in for the officer to go out and investigate. So he went out and investigated, and he followed it for a while until he realized that it was going to go out of his jurisdiction. So he radioed back to his main base, and they called ahead to the next jurisdiction, and so on and so on. And it was spotted on a continuous time. 5 different police officers saw this triangular shaped craft. May 2008. A Catholic astronomer actually said that the existence of extraterrestrials is a possibility. and belief in extraterrestrial life does not deny the existence of God, which it doesn't. This was approximately 6 months after a meeting about exopolitics. What exopolitics is the politics involved when an extraterrestrial civilization makes their presence known to our world. How are we going to react? What are we going to ask for? How are we going to deal with them? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This happened in very near Istanbul, a place called Kamburgaz, Italy. Excuse me, Turkey. And in the early morning hours, a security guard was getting out of work, and they just happened to have one of these super duper zoom-in television cameras there. And he used the camera to zoom in on a dot that was out over top of the Straits of Bosporus. And what he saw, on each one of these is a separate photo. Each one of those is a separate photo of what he saw. He said that thing was absolutely enormous, even though it only appeared as a dot. You could tell it was just huge. You can look that up on the internet, Kamburgaz, Turkey, and be able to read a whole lot of information about it. Lee Summit, Missouri. And what's interesting about this is 5 people saw an object. Big deal. Well, they were hikers, and they were up on top of a hill. And the hill that they were on, they looked out, and down in front, down to their left, these spacecraft went by. It's different when you look up into a bright white sky. What you see a whole lot of glare, and you know it's easy to make a mistake when you look there. But this, they were looking down on it, and it was crystal clear to them. Really interesting sighting. Now and up to 2024, we are building an antenna array. Everybody know what an array is? Antenna array? Okay, let me give you a little quick description of this. You've all seen the, oops, that's not it.
Over by the monitor over here.
Oh, okay. You've all seen the dish antennas on roofs, right? Okay, looks like one of those, okay? The interesting thing about this is a parabolic dish, okay? Now this parabolic dish has a very interesting mathematical deal to it. No matter what angle something comes in from, if it hits on the dish, it will reflect to one spot in the middle. No matter what angle it goes to, it goes in the back, it comes out. This is a parabolic reflector, and it's a mathematical function. That's how they arrive at using a parabola as a dish reflector. Now this center point, this is what goes to the radio receiver. Okay, that's just some basic information. Right now, the parabolic reflector, if you put one here and put one 1,000 miles away, aiming at the same thing, then run some electronics hocus pocus on the thing, okay? What it does is it effectively gives you the same thing as one antenna that is 1,000 miles wide. Same thing. Well, what they are going to do is this antenna array, they're going to put up thousands and thousands of small antennas over multiple square miles. And it's going to be one super duper antenna. Super duper. As a matter of fact, it is going to be so good that it will be able to be able to pick up an airport radar at 30 light years. Now, a light year is 6 trillion miles. Okay? 30 light years would be 180 trillion miles. And within 6 light years, there are approximately 6 stars. Okay? 6 stars within that range. Now, doesn't mean that it will just fail after that. It means that it would be able to pick up an airport radar at that distance. Okay? But it will be able to pick up smaller signals, signals that are similar at greater distances. Right now they're looking throughout the entire sky. And within 10 light years, there's 9 stars, and within 25 light years, there are 33 stars. And they're looking. The electronic hocus pocus that they do to make that signal work, that's called interferometer. What it does is, it takes a signal, looks at what is coming in, and uses it to interfere with the other signal that's coming in, and it cancels out. And what's left is the signal. Very cool stuff. Alien races. Well, I have no first-hand knowledge of these, but there's a lot of people who have been doing abduction interviews. And what they found is they get descriptions of the people who have abducted them. And they're able to determine that this is probably from this kind of race of people. And they've been able to come up with general things like this. It's really cool. And also, they have been able to estimate that there are probably 1 million worlds with races of intelligent beings. 1 million. I think that number is way low. Way higher than that. I think that there might be 1 million worlds of races that are capable of star travel. That might be, but in the entire universe, I'll show you in a minute. Exopolitics. I mentioned exopolitics before. It's a study of the key individuals, political institutions, and processes associated with extraterrestrial life. If a UFO landed on the Washington Monument area, what are we going to do? What do we say to them? Well, we have to have people to greet them. They may be speaking about science that we don't understand, so we're going to have to put together our best scientists. They may talk about religion, so we have to put out members of the various religions. It's a pretty big deal, and they've been talking about this for probably in the 20-year range. And it should concern you that our national leaders are not doing a good job of keeping the ship. There's some issues, certainly some issues, and that's not just our leaders, that's across the world, okay? There's skirmishes and battles and everything else. Well, we're not going to get an extraterrestrial civilization to land and help us if everybody's an idiot, okay? It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Now, let me go over this. We live in the Milky Way galaxy. Our galaxy, there we go, okay? Our galaxy contains 200 to 400 billion stars. That's just in our galaxy. There may be 1 trillion galaxies. Now, The Milky Way is kind of an average size. If we multiply it out, 400 billion stars in 1 trillion galaxies, that means a total of 400 times, or 4 times 10 to the 23rd stars. That's a lot of stars. Each star, based on how it's created, creates a disk of materials around it. It's called an accretion disk. And this disk of materials is going around at a super fast speed. It's like banging into each other, and after maybe 1 million years or so, you start getting larger and larger satellites around the star, and pretty soon they're planets. If these planets happen to be within the habitable zone, warm enough so that water can stay as a liquid, you're going to get some things to happen. If there's that many stars, there's probably 10 times as many planets. Now around Jupiter, Jupiter's a big gas giant, okay? We can't live on Jupiter, even in our dreams, okay? We certainly could live on a Jupiter moon. I actually think that moons are more likely to have life on them in the universe than are planets. In the last 150 years, we went from horseback to space travel, which is, it's mind-boggling. I think we had help. I just think we had help. There's just no way. But what could we do in 1,000 more years at that trajectory? What about 1 million more? Maybe we can transcend into the energy or some deal like that. I don't know.